use it. So we want to welcome you guys here today and to Mulvaney's. So you guys will be here all day. Make yourselves at home, right? The restaurant's closed, so if you need space next door, you can sit in the restaurant. It's a little noisy. If you need a private office, we have 3 small rooms in the back you guys can use for phone calls. Welcome to wander around outside. If anybody wants to dig in and help roast the lamb, then that would be pretty good. And then we want to thank and then just for us from Mulvaney's, we want to thank you guys for everything you're doing, for making the world better. AG, a lot of you guys have heard this before. AG Kawamura, the last Ag Secretary before Mr. Ross, said at his retirement that in California we are neither red nor blue but green, with the goal of taking the land we got from our grandparents and leaving it in better shape for our grandchildren. So we want to thank you guys for being here and leaning into that. And that's it. Bathrooms here. There's one bathroom on the other side. There's more bathrooms in there. I'm really bad at housekeeping. Ask my wife. And anything else you want to know, these guys will all take care of you. And we want to welcome you. All the lamb and goat is halal, right? And I'm not sure about whoever that is out here, and I'm not sure about the rest of the stuff. But Michael and Patrick, thank you very much. Courtney, Doris, for all you do. So that's all I'm supposed to say, right?
That's perfect.
All right, thank you guys very much. Make yourselves at home.
All right, thank you, Chef. First off, just thank you everyone for showing up. This is a great turnout for our 3rd and final summit on regenerative meat that we've hosted over the last year and a half. I'm Patrick Huber. I'm at UC Davis. The other parts of the team are Roots of Change. I'm sure most of you know Michael, and Doris is back over there. And then we have IC Foods, our technical partner, with Courtney over here, and Matthew somewhere in the audience. There he is. Yeah, so I'm just going to give a quick rundown of what we're actually doing here and why everyone's here. So this is kind of the culmination of 3 years of work on the part of our team and working with all of you. And so we want to go over some of what we've accomplished, what you've accomplished, some of the successes that we've seen, and discuss how people can get involved with some of those successes. And then we're going to look at some new emerging market opportunities as well to take beyond what we've been able to accomplish so far, but there are still multiple paths that we can go down over the coming years. So we'll dig into that. And of course, as we all know, there are going to be challenges associated with all of what we're trying to do here. So we'll dig into some of those challenges and what some of the opportunities might be for kind of pushing past them. So we're going to we have a few panels lined up over the course of the day with a lunch in between. And so I think we have 3 panels, something like that. And so how the panels will work is we'll have the speakers go, have 3 or 4 speakers, and then we'll have 20-ish minutes, 30 minutes, something like that, for discussion. We want to have a rich dialogue with the audience. So that's going to be kind of how these panels are set up. And then at the end, we'll have a reception, and there's going to be a dinner after that for some of you that are sticking around for that. I think
there's the goat tasting, too.
And the goat tasting, yes. Thank you. So, Michael, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay.
Michael,
Yeah.
Before you go,
Yeah.
because I'm 60 and I'm not really well versed in this, for anybody, someone just asked, and I confirmed that the Wi-Fi is Mulvaney's, all lowercase, no up.
Anybody having trouble with that? Good. So I want to thank Natalie and Sophia and Alexis for helping us set this whole thing up. They've been really helpful from the Mulvaney's team, and they're a joy to work with. We do a lot of events here, and we really appreciate all the years of support. And as said, thank you. We're going to jump right in. I guess the one thing I want to say is that, it's all up to us to make things happen in the world, and everybody has their operation they're working on, or their nonprofit, or their government institution, and all we're trying to do is get everybody in communication, because it's very hard to break out of our silos. I know that after years of working, it's hard to break out of your silos, and this day is really about your opportunity to break out of a silo and meet someone you haven't met, find out about something you didn't know, and make maybe a new connection that will lead to something for you and for them. So anyway, with that, why don't we begin with the first panel?
Let's jump into it. So Marilyn, Cliff, and Kathy, why don't you come to the front? Great, thank you. So our first panel is going to be looking at one of the successes of the project that we're really excited about, and that is the University of California's commitment to source California regenerative meat for the 10 campuses and 5 medical center systems. To talk about that, we're going to start off with Kathy Webster from the Cat Taylor Foundation and the Beef to Institution program that kind of was the start of this whole thing, maybe, or at least one of the starts of this whole thing. Then we'll launch into Marilyn Biscotti from the University of California Office of the President Procurement Team, who's leading the effort to change the UC SHIP into the regenerative direction. And then we have Cliff Pollard from Creamco to talk about what some of the process is going to look like for getting the meat into the system. So each of them is, and we're missing one of our 4 panelists, Santana Diaz, whose daughter went into labor a few hours ago, so he's at the hospital on a much more important mission than what we're doing here today. But our panelists will be able to cover for him and what he was going to bring. So we'll have about 10 minutes for each of them, and then we'll open it up to kind of the fuller discussion with the whole group. So Kathy, you want to lead us?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I'm Kathy at TomKat Ranch Educational Foundation in Pescadero, California. We raise grass-fed beef, and we have goats. My role is food advocacy manager, and I manage our Left Coast grass-fed beef label. Little background of myself: I've been at the ranch for 17 years now, so I helped start the whole program. I've always been very passionate about food, even when I was a little girl growing up, and the connection of getting out and picking your own food and making your own food was always instilled upon me from my parents to my grandparents. So a little background on Beef to Institution. It starts back in around 2009. I was helping the beef, the cattle go to the beef business and launch that. But I also was working inside the kitchen of our local small school district, La Honda Pescadero Unified School District. When I was working in there and I was helping them shift from heat and serve to scratch cooking and sourcing locally. And when I was there, I was kind of shocked at the meat. I was a vegetarian in college many years ago, and I had just started eating grass-fed beef from Morris Grass-Fed. And I just didn't feel right eating it, and why would we serve our students? And TomKat was less than a mile away. So how could I make it work to get our beef into our students? And I started there. And as the years went by, we do a lot of work with school food, and I wanted to see other schools, San Mateo, Santa Clara County, get locally sourced grass-fed meat into the schools. And I started working with Community Alliance with Family Farmers. Ben Thomas was there at the time, and we collaborated quite a bit. And I'm like, how do we do this? And he said, I think you need to start coming to this meeting I'm having with Healthcare Without Harm. And they were doing work around Bay Area hospitals and ProcureWorks around sustainability. And one of their challenges was getting sustainable beef and poultry in. Many of these hospitals were sourcing from Australia, New Zealand, Uruguay, and how could we focus on getting local meat into the hospitals and schools. So we looked at it as like, okay, so healthcare without harm will help the program coordination as well as getting the hospitals on board. And CAF would focus on schools and helping with technical assistance for purchasing this meat. So we started by having our first meeting at TomKat Ranch, and TomKat Ranch's role was to work with the local ranchers. So our first meeting was in 2019, around September. I looked at the timeline, so I needed to see this. And it was getting a handful of Northern California hospitals, including Kaiser Permanente and a few from Santa Clara, San Francisco, as well as schools, food service directors and decision makers, and a handful of ranches, including Stemple Creek, Morris Grass-Fed, and Richards Grass-Fed. And we wanted everyone in a room so we could just discuss, is this something that you're interested in? Is this something that is viable, that we could work for both sides, the ranchers, be it sustainable, to sell to you guys? And everyone was interested. So we had another meeting. March, beginning of 2020, we talked about challenges. Like, what cuts could the schools take and what cuts would the hospitals take? Schools K through 12 are tricky. Some of them cannot receive raw beef product, so we had to try to come up with something called a beef crumble. Yeah. Yeah, and a fully cooked beef patty, so to make it work into the schools. And so Richards helped us get help with the Creamco folks to design this extra product so it's ready to go into the schools. And the hospitals looked more to the fajita cuts and the stew meats. So then, of course, the pandemic hit. So schools obviously really started focusing on just feeding the kids and feeding their families. And we took a step back and we're like, okay, now we need to work with the hospitals. There was a outlier, Chef Santana Diaz, who I wish was here, who was attending some of the Healthcare Without Harm meetings. And so Ben and Courtney from Healthcare Without Harm and I had a call with him. And this was around June 2020. And he's like, I want to make this happen. We need to get this meat in there. Well, one of the biggest hurdles to get into the hospitals is the broadliners, US Foods, Cisco. And how could we do that? And Richards said, we're willing to try to get into US Foods. That is no easy feat at all. And I'm sure one of the Richards can talk more later about that, but it's, how do you get paid? How do you get in there? Because they're so used to working with such huge ranches, and not even ranches, companies. So from there, I'll hand it to
Marilyn, I think.
Good morning. Happy to be here, and thank you, Roots of Change, for inviting me again. This is my second time here. And to be honest with you, it was only 2 years ago that I was asked to speak here about regenerative production protein for UCOP, and I was like, so what is it, first of all? So in the last 2 years, I have educated myself, met with many farmers and Clifford to execute a regenerative program into the UCOP. So one of the first things I did was align with Chef Santana, because UC Davis Health has already been buying regenerative. So wanted to go to the source of how are you doing, how did you do it? Because I didn't want to reinvent the wheel on transitioning 10 campuses when it has already been done. So a lot of conversations have happened, a lot of education, thanks to Roots of Change, on what regenerative is as well. So where we're at today is we are in 3 campuses with regenerative proteins, which is UC Davis, Merced, and Berkeley. And UC San Diego Health, and obviously Davis is buying regenerative. But I have already spoken to the other campuses, and they are wanting to also buy regenerative beef. So it's been an education on our part to educate the campuses on what it means to buy regenerative. And we have the priority with UCOP that this is the direction that we are going to go. So today I'm happy to say that we have integrated and we are in the process of developing a contract with Creamco. The way that this is working, the structure has to be very different. Our priorities are to be sustainable, 25% spend for campus and 30% for UC Health. We are at an average about 20% of meeting our goals for 2030, so we're going to exceed it by 2030. And part of our initiative is not only to be sustainable, but is to buy from small business. And this is why we're here to reach out to the farmers. We also have someone here who is responsible for our small business. We talked about creating contracts directly with farmers as well to see what will that look like, so that we're working directly with you and capital expenses towards the farmers. What we're doing with Creamco in our contract is we decided to structure it to be pork, beef, and lamb. Just this way we can break it out and we can work directly with the specific farmers for those protein items. So we're getting there, but a lot of it has to still be education with the campuses and the dining directors. But you guys have our support from UCOP. And I'd also like to mention that part of the challenge here is distribution. We can't have a lot of trucks come into the campuses because of the time frame that the trucks have to be there. So we're working with the distributors like Creamco who could work with the farmers directly and get your product into them.
Great. So Creamco, CEO Clifford Pollard, and our role in this process is really the missing middle and kind of what often is the messy middle. It's very nebulous, it's very complicated, providing service to these large institutions that have a certain degree of expectation when it comes to being serviced. And that's really what Creamco is trying to do, is kind of bridge that gap between farm direct and broadline distribution. And it's the whole gamut of aggregating supply from 10, 15, 20 different suppliers, fabricating it into uniform finished goods, accepting orders at 5 p.m. for next day delivery. So all these things that we have to do to essentially show up like a Broadliner, like a US Foods or a Cisco, to get the conversion, to get larger institutions to say, we could work with this. This is acceptable from an operational point of view. And Creamco very much is working on solving those problems, kind of removing those hurdles to allow for these products, these programs, these vendors to flow seamlessly into a much larger buying system. So we've been doing it since we joined Beef to Institution, I think in 2021. And it's been a slow process, but we are starting to get some real momentum going. We are working with Cal Berkeley, UC Davis, UC Merced, UC San Diego. We have interest from UCLA, and that's great. And the UCOP contract, I think, is going to be wonderful to kind of clear the way a bit when it comes to whether or not those entities can work with a Creamco, can work with this type of regional supply chain. But ultimately, it's still a groundswell situation that we have to develop on an individual level. It's the individual chefs that are making these decisions. It's the individual purchasers that are making the decision to move from this conventional commodity product to this sustainable, regenerative West Coast product. So there's still a lot of boots on the ground work that needs to get done and be done to really get this conversion that we're all trying to work for and develop in California. In 2024, Creamco will have purchased about 1.3 million pounds in West Coast regenerative meats. The UC system, I believe, purchased about 600,000 pounds, or will purchase about 600,000 pounds of that particular program, line as far as Creamco is concerned. So we're looking at about a 30% growth, we're hoping, in 2025, which is approximately 400,000 pounds of additional California regen meat that we could move into this pipeline, which, to kind of put it into like heads of cattle, it's about 850 heads of cattle. For instance, some of it will be cattle. Creamco does more than just cattle. We do pork, we do chicken, we do lamb, etc. But we think the opportunity is really growing at about a 30% year-over-year pace with California Regen and the UC system. That's the goal that we're setting for ourselves. So it's not going to solve, our global supply wants, desires overnight, but it certainly is a great step in the right direction to continue to see these doors open, to work with UCOP and the individual UCs to get them interested. But it's still, this is a celebration, I think, of the beginning of the process. There's still a lot of work to do. We are kind of getting the blessing from the powers that be within UCOP, and we have obviously a lot of great connections across the UC system. But ultimately, we still have to go out there and win the business. We still have to go out there and convince folks that this is how and where they should be moving their supply chains. And the individual campuses all have slightly different requirements as far as what exactly they're looking for. Some are much more focused on super local, regenerative, grass-fed, grass-finished. Some just want grass-fed and halal, could be domestic or coming from the Southern Hemisphere. So it's still a very nebulous situation. It's still complex, but that's what Creamco is doing, is trying to navigate that situation, trying to just create more opportunities for folks to source these types of products if and when they're ready. And I do think the feedback that we're getting on the individual basis is that folks want this. They want to see this in their supply chain. They want to move in this direction, but there's a lot of different factors at play, right? I mean, there's availability, consistency, the economics of it. These are the types of discussions, when the rubber really hits the road, that we're working on and kind of developing and hopefully making progress with over time.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so being very optimistic, I'm going to say that we're definitely going to be there. I have meetings with the dining directors, with them, and our initiative with UCOP is you will buy regenerative. So it's not a matter of will they will buy it, right? So part of my job is to, how am I going to get the product into the campus, right? We're looking for reasonable pricing. We're looking for distribution into the campuses that makes sense for them to receive the product. Right now you see San Diego campus, they have 151,000 pounds of beef that they're ready to buy in regenerative as soon as this UCOP contract is done. So that's the good news. And then also for UCOP contracts, we have Cal State universities who take our contracts. So once we start marketing to Cal State universities, we have that volume as well to add on. So, we're pretty excited about the direction we're going. We are going to get there. And part of, my job is to understand, what issues do the farmers have, or do the producers have, to try to get your product into distribution or into our campuses. We really want to hear that so we could assist. The conversations I'm having with my CPO is, how could we help the farmers? So the more that we learn about you and what your needs are, we could assist. I'm very creative on, how we can get things done. And I think part of it is, like we said, if we need to help capitalize a farmer, we're willing to do that. So our creative minds are very open to get regenerative in there and to help the farmers, to help the community, and that's what we're looking for.
Great, thank you. So before I open it up to questions, I assume some of the questions are going to be along the lines of, someone in the audience wants to get involved, what do they do now, and what's that process looking like over the next few months or whatever the timeline is?
I think the best thing to do is you can contact Cream Co. Clifford, because we are going to have a UCOP contract, or you can contact myself as well. I did tell Clifford this. I am going to open up an RFP as well for regenerative product. So this will give you the opportunity to, let me know who you are and if you want to participate in this RFP. And I think that's a good segue for me to understand how you could run your business. I could advise you how to get into the system. So I think when we start having those conversations, then we're going to help each other out. So.
And do you have a sense of what the timeline looks like for people to start being able to sign contracts or sell product to you?
Yeah, well, our contract with Cream Co. will probably be, he's actually done a contract with UC Berkeley, so it'll be fairly easy. It'll be done within,
Tomorrow.
It'll be done by, I don't know, could be 3 weeks or sooner. It's just, finalizing the paperwork. Right?
One point that I want to make is like the concept of aggregation and aggregating to the right size when it comes to supply chains, right? So aggregation is so important in this process. So for a smaller rancher that is harvesting 10 head a month, 20 head a month, less, a little bit more, we really have to find those live animal partners, other ranching partners that are at a slightly larger size when it comes to their live animal aggregation, to funnel those animals into along with them. A lot of that has to do with just the economies of scale, of course, but also with the requirements that UCOP and the UCs have when it comes to food safety, going to the right slaughterhouse that has the right audits, coming to us because we are third-party food safety audited, which they require. Cream Co. has a $10 million insurance policy. That's important because you're on these campuses and your trucks might hit things. So there are lots of hurdles when it comes to the concept of direct distribution into a UC system. It kind of starts with that aggregation point on the live animal side, aggregating to slaughter, and then aggregation to create finished goods that are consistent, that can be scaled to meet the demand across all these UC systems. We can't create 20 different 1x1 inch stew meats, right? And that's a big SKU for UCs. We need to create one stew. Now we can aggregate from a bunch of different producers into that stew, but it has to be one unified SKU for us to have economies of scale, for the UC buyers to receive a consistent product that's scalable into their operations, and for it to come with all the food safety bells and whistles, with the right insurance policies, et cetera, et cetera. So aggregation is a really important part of this if we really want to achieve scale with independent ranchers from across the West Coast into further processing and ultimately out to the UC system.
Great. So I'd like to open it up to the audience at this point. Yeah, Michael.
I have one quick question. So I remember the very first meeting we had for this project. It was at PT Ranch. Molly hosted us. Molly, you want to hold up your hand? Where are you? I thought I saw you here. Okay, and we had some really cool ranchers in the room. And the first thing they said is, look at, regenerative or grass-fed requires longer time on the ground. We got to finish animals. Are we going to get paid a premium for that? So the big challenge, I think, to get the flow going is that we need more money per animal, right? So the big challenge there is the UC campuses, the whole country, everybody's having trouble with their budgets. So I'm just wondering if you envision maybe less meat but better meat where we're paying that 20%. So you buy 20% less, but we pay 20% more in order to ensure the ranchers who are finishing these animals on these operations can actually do it and participate.
I could speak to that a little bit, yeah. So the ceiling on price point is very real when it comes to the budgetary needs of the UC system, right? Again, that's where aggregation plays a role. We have to blend regen products down sometimes with Never Ever, or Never Ever grass-fed halal. That's not necessarily regenerative to get to that price point that will allow for adoption. It's just a reality of the economics of it. The concept of like a single origin, small regen farm getting into a UC system with a premium price point, that's not scalable. It's just not what's gonna happen. We have to take this blended approach. A percentage of regen should be growing with the products that we're buying and selling into these larger systems. But getting a huge premium, or a premium that would be meaningful enough to kind of, I think, attain the means or the ends that you're looking for, is just not practical when it comes to how these big buyers think. They don't think from that point of view. They need consistent, scalable stew meat. They need it to be at the same price point for all concepts across the campus. There are few exceptions here and there with case in, case out products, holiday specials, et cetera, where they might be able to feature a single origin product from a specific ranch. But when you're talking about the day in, day out business, we have to blend products to get to a certain price point that will actually get conversion, because the premium on a straight regen single origin program is huge comparatively to a blended product.
Go ahead, Molly, and then we'll get to you, Tim.
Hold on a second. Wait for the mic. Hello. Well, first of all, thank you, Marilyn. This is very exciting. And to your point, Cliff, obviously the price point is challenging. And I'm just curious, besides the procurement pledge, is the UC system prepared to pay some type of premium?
So part of my job is to get these programs into the system. I have spoken, there's a group at UCOP called the Capital Planning Group, where we're looking at ahead going, where's our price point? And so part of it is, hey, listen, our initiative is regenerative, right? It's costing probably 15, 18% more. So what we're doing, I've just finalized putting a case together saying, this is what our forecast is, and this is how much more it's costing us. So we're trying to get a budget to suffice that increase. And we're looking at, this capital group is looking at funding from the government to do this, because what we're saying is that it is a benefit to the farmers. It's a benefit for local communities. So that's the message that we're sending. It's not specifically for, because we don't have the budget, even though we're paid by the government. It's because we want to support the farmers. So that's our initiative, and that's what we're saying. And our executive group is up for that. It's just, a matter of continuing conversations and not, not letting it down and just saying, we need to cover the budget. We need to cover the budget. The dining directors do want to do this. In fact, one of the programs that we have that they committed to is we're going to be looking at all of our meat specifications and determining which cuts of meat will we go regenerative on, and then kind of forecast what our traditional price is versus regenerative. So we will actually have a story and a hard number to go to our executives and capital planning to say, this is how much is going to cost, and this is the increase that we need for our budget.
Can I add something too? And I think, because I know more about the K through 12 school side, but a lot of the hospitals have a lot of pressure to do plant-based menus. And when they're pushing the regenerative meat, that's amazing, but yes, their budgets and the ranchers need to be paid, but how do the hospitals and universities do this is by, don't serve like a burger on the menu, serve something like a grass-fed regenerative chili, or incorporate it into a prepared meal that you add vegetables and things like that in, so you're not spending, out of the league type thing.
I'll add one more, just kind of comment on the topic. That 15 to 18% that Marilyn, I think, is referencing, often I think is the blended premium. If it was a single origin regen product, it could be closer to 30% or 40% above the conventional or commodity products that they could buy. So I just kind of want to make that clear.
Good morning, everyone. Tim Galarno, Center for Agroecology. I think I've been waiting like 20 years to get on the reservation list for Mulvaney's for this specific meeting. Since I was an undergraduate student, and we gathered 10,000 postcards and went to the regents and wanted this big policy. And I can't think of a greater time to be in this conversation with Marilyn in her role. Her predecessor, Eric, got socialized into the Healthy Regenerative Chicken Summit with hospitals 12 years ago. But the level of which you've been invited in and being responsive to community doing this work, and to your point, Michael, it does take a village. And I think Marilyn and Anya, so I'll pass the mic to briefly after this, and Marilyn and I get to co-direct the next phase of our Global Climate Leadership Council project, working with all the campuses and the health centers. We'll be releasing a report in a week about this first phase, and we have H from Supply Chain, Troublemaker, Ben from Shared Plate Strategies, our CAF partners. We have the community involved in the praxis of the project, so that it aren't folks removed from the work, but people in the work. And after having been at CAF's gathering of small organic farmers last week, we hosted at the Hay Barn that Hector Raeder led, farmers are hurting. Like, they're literally about to break down and close up shop. So I really hear the price point issue, and it's really comforting to think both what UCOP can do and what your advocacy, Michael, is suggesting that is a win-win for our students. They want less destructive product in their system. So if we can go 20% less crappy industrial meat and go big to get deeper in the commitment, that's a win-win. And we just spent a weekend with students around the whole system, Agnes and I, getting to connect, and there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. So I'll quickly pass it to you.
Thank you, Tim. It's always hard to go after Tim. Agnes Martel, I am Associate Director of Sustainability, actually, so I kind of work on the other side of, the procurement machine. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that I think the plant-based goals that we have actually line up quite well with our sustainable food goal, because this is where we can get some of the cost savings. And and there is another piece that I really wanted to bring into the discussion, is also the role of the students in this effort, because they are also hurting. The cost of food is a challenge and that's what our dining directors are trying to navigate, is maintaining the food that is affordable for the students while also providing better food. And so getting the students really engaged and both understanding, the difference between a regenerative meat versus not, and also just doing the advocacy and really letting the directors know that they actually care, because otherwise there's not that push from, the folks that are eating to really say, yes, we really need this. So that's the piece that sort of I'm more engaged in, is really sort of working with the students and making sure that voice is included in the discussion. But yeah, it's not an easy equation to make, to get to the point where it actually works. But we are getting there, and it's really exciting to see.
Great, thanks, Agnes and Tim. Let's go back over here.
Hey there, Tom Richards with Richards Regenerative. I first want to say thank you to our three panelists, because we've partnered with all three, and it's the reason we're still here as a company, and it's one of the reasons our brand has thrived, so thank you. We've also been a guinea pig for basically everything, and Santana, I will say a thank you to him, even though he's not here, because when we started to work with him early on, he said to us, look, you charge whatever you need to, because I'm going to take, the small amount of beef that we buy from you, and I'm going to blend it with our other costs. And so we absolutely understand, where Cliff is coming from, and this idea of blending. We understand the cost. Believe me, even when I go out to buy food, and Even when I look at our own prices, I think, wow, things have gone up. But what Santana did with us is he just said, hey, look, I realize right now your product is expensive, but what we're really talking about here is scale, okay? And so our big thing is, we have more cattle we could sell, right? So, and as the number of cattle starts to increase and the number of regenerative cattle increases, right, we can start to see that price go down. But I think in these early days, the voice you're hearing from all of us in the audience is that we understand that price is expensive, and it has to be right now for us to survive. So it's really about survival. And so all I would ask is that, from the contract perspective, I know Cliff understands this. I mean, I know you all do. But if we can really take that perspective of, how do we enable us smaller regional guys to get through this, ramp, if you will, and into that scale where then we can start to drop those prices, if that makes sense.
Great, thanks, Tom. Any responses? Yeah, Kathy.
Well, I want to add one thing because I know it's been a fight trying to get regenerative grass-fed meat into the schools and hospitals, but one of the things I think you guys have to follow is the World Resources Institute and their really confined focus on greenhouse gases, and whereas regenerative ranches focus holistically and they look at all things from the ecosystem to the soil health to the plant health to the human health, and there's some amazing studies out there around nutrient density of our beef, and if we can show and justify these costs, because they are justifiable, what we're doing on the land and what we're doing for the humans. I just read something that more than half of our population is obese. I really do believe it has to do with our soil health.
Yeah, Kathy, that's a great point, because we are aware we're really big into the emission and saving and all of that. So part of we'll have to have a conversation after this, because I would love to get that data, because we're our big initiative in the next, I would say, 3 months or into the first quarter of next year is to really sell regenerative, really put a story together of this is why we need to do this. And then as we have the meeting with the dining directors, we have that data to say all of our initiatives at UCOP, regenerative is part of all of these different initiatives. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, but absolutely.
One thing I'll add as well, just about the same topic, is that the contract with us in UCOP is also a cost-plus contract, right? So it's based on our costing floor and then an overage that scales down with volume increase. So it's a very transparent contract. It's something that we do have to kind of keep those costs in mind and try to find the right balance so that we're still competitive. Again, the individual locations are trying to balance their budgets. They're trying to figure out how to move the parts, around and kind of rebuild the puzzle pieces to be able to buy more of these products. Cost is a major factor.
Right. Matthew, over to you.
Thanks. So I'm listening to this conversation, and first of all, thanks for such a great panel. It's really great to see all of this happening. And I'm hearing the pluses for the economy. I'm hearing the pluses for the environment. I'm hearing the pluses for the health and students. And I'm hearing, the friction points of the cost associated with this, and the fact that we're not at scale yet for regenerative. And what I don't have a good sense of is two things that I think are worth knowing. One is that when we're giving money to regenerative farmers and smaller farmers, we're improving the California economy, right? We're improving the economy. We haven't really had that discussion here, but the dollars stay local, and that's really important for getting more of the economy keeping going in the local and regional areas. And as we ramp up to scale, my question is how big is it? How much room is there? What percentage are we at now? What percentage is regenerative right now? What percentage of the orders? What percentage of the total supply? Like, what does this look like in a big picture economically? Where are we at?
I was looking for Molly and Ryan because I know they've done numbers on like how many cattle are in our state. How can we do this? Do one of you guys please address that?
We're huddling.
We actually did research at the beginning in our white paper and in our database. We interviewed a lot of different people. We put out a thing through the Cattlemen's Association, through all the organizations in this room. I think it was 22,000 cattle were being finished in California. Is that right? Yeah. You're the head researcher. I think it was that. We can follow up on this, but we actually have data on how many, and I don't know how many people actually answered the survey that we sent out, but it was the first thing that we did. And we had a list of all the ranches, and we had what was their commodity cattle, how many were being finished, and then we had also other lambs, goats. We had a whole big thing. We can make that available. After this, we'll send it out.
And I should just add that we all know finding this data is hard, right? And we put a lot of effort into this, and it was, a fraction of the population actually responded. So the people responding, we're assuming, are the people that are kind of in this space. So it's a pretty good idea, but yeah, getting the accurate information is a huge challenge. But actually, and I'll point to it later when we're talking about the website. That white paper is on our website, so that information is there. We can all go back and look at it. Yeah.
And I just wanted to add, that's kind of how these groups all came together, Roots of Change, IC Foods, and UC Davis. They were doing all this research around ranches and what ranches want to get on board with doing these climate smart practices. And then Beef to Institution was really about building that demand and putting them together. So that's why we can't give you a really fast and easy answer right now. We're running with the boots pulling up.
I kind of have some sense of the total size from a poundage point of view. I think that we're somewhere between like 7.5–10% of poundage with the UC systems, and about 30% of that poundage is West Coast regen, and so that poundage is 600,000 that we're going to do in 2024, which again I think is about 7.5 to 10% of the total poundage, and then 30% of that 600,000 is regen at this point. What was that? Yeah, I think it's about 7.5–10% of the total weight that we're selling is the total consumable weight of the entire system, and then that's 600,000 pounds that we're moving in 2024. 30% of that 600,000 pounds is from West Coast regen producers.
For 200,000 pounds.
It's a small amount. There's plenty of room for growth.
Patrick,
Okay, yeah, go for it.
recently, and I'm not up on this as much as my friend Greg Gunthorpe is, but the federal government and USDA AMS just came out with a program for federal food feeding programs having to buy local. And they're supporting that, and there's money there for them to buy local, so that takes, when you go back to your budgeting and you say, yeah, we can buy local because there's money to help support that and get away from the commodity buying, because that'll even the price point. But it's very new. AMS, the numbers are on the website for the USDA. So with this mandate coming out that you have to buy local, we're not going to get into all of the misterms of grass-fed, grass-finished, who did this, I raised them that way, that kind of stuff. But if you can tap into that local buying thing and put your support behind that, I think you'd be further ahead. And you've already got the mandate from you guys to do that, and now you've got the support of the federal government saying, we're going to help you do that. So that will help with your price point.
Great. Note to our team to make sure we have access to that information.
Yeah, I
on
will
our
get it to you.
website.
Greg's been doing a lot of that work. Kathy, I just didn't have time with the conference coming on. And so I think that it'll even out some of the numbers there and go from there. But and you'll probably have to put some affiliates and associates together to meet the demand. But the money's there. It's already been allocated.
Great.
But one more comment about scale as well, which is we've talked a lot about pricing, and that might be the largest limiting factor. But there's also whole animal utilization. And that's a big piece of the puzzle, right? Because the UCs, the institutions, the public schools, they want the rounds, the chucks, the clods, the trim, and then we have all these middle meats. And often we have to upcycle those middle meats into lower revenue items to be able to keep up with the demand on the other finished goods, which really hurts us on our margin, right? So we're constantly looking to find more business on strip loins, ribeyes, top sirloins, and finding those businesses that can keep cadence and kind of parallel scale with the UC demand is going to be essential, incredibly critical when it comes to actually scaling supply, because we can only do so much of kind of taking it on the chin and having to upcycle those items, and we're getting hit with a pretty bad cost of goods from doing so. So that's something that we're working very hard to solve that piece of the puzzle. But that's a huge limiting factor to like the practical elements of scaling this supply chain.
Right. Yeah, let's go into the back there.
Yes, hi. A question, we talked about price and other factors. I'm wondering, can you comment, as you move so much more poundage into regen, do you have any concerns around supply? Like, is there enough to really scale? Is there enough regen supply out there and farmers to be able to do that?
If you were to lift these other concerns, if you were to remove the concern of price point, if you were to remove the concern of whole animal utilization, I would say yes, probably. We would need a lot more supply. But given that we actually have to navigate those elements, right? We have to blend to a price point that folks can be comfortable with converting their supply chains in this direction. We also have to find buyers for the parts of the animals that the UCs, the public schools, et cetera, don't want. Right now, I think there's plenty of supply that's available for us to continue to grow at what we have determined a economically viable rate of integration, which is about 30% of our global usage coming from this type of producer. I think that there's plenty of supply to continue growing at that rate. Now, if the UC comes back to us and says, you know what, we're going to pay a 20% premium for regen going forward, and we win a huge deal with Whole Foods that says, don't worry about your middle meats, your fillets, your whatever anymore. At that point, we might be looking at a different scenario, but kind of with these barriers in place, or kind of these hurdles in place, I think there's plenty of supply to continue growing at a reasonable rate.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that briefly. I think it also really depends on how we're defining regenerative. I think that if you asked any one person here, like, what is regenerative meat, you'd get the equal amount of participants in this room with unique definitions. So I would probably disagree with Cliff on like the supply thing. I don't think that there's enough supply, because I don't think that there's like a properly articulated incentive right now to go. Especially if you're a beef producer, like what what market signals, or if any signals exist right now for you to change, and then what market exists to then purchase your goods. So this messy middle that Cliff is talking about is a huge deal, and it's not well articulated from the point of rancher to consumer, and everything in between.
Quick thing. So, Cliff, one of the things that we noticed at the beginning of this project was people that you were dealing with were selling you, basically you were getting their trim and the lower value cuts that you were mentioning, and they were keeping their middle meats and selling direct. There are some people that have been doing that. No, you're saying no.
Less so no than yes. So we're buying more whole animals on the rail than we are buying parts and pieces from other folks.
Okay, so are you saying that it's impossible for people to keep? I mean, does it not help you to get just grind meats? You want the middle meat?
No, we love it all. Yeah, I mean, we buy as much as we can get our hands on. I'm just saying that as of right now, we're buying much more cattle on the rail than we are components from other producers.
And is that because you're buying cull animals, or is that because people are just selling you whatever they have?
We're buying finished animals, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because I do remember conversations with people who were saying, look, I just want to move my grinds and lower value stuff because I can sell all my steaks.
And we buy all those commodities when they are available.
Okay.
Thank you for being here and doing all the work that you are doing here for us. So I wear two hats in life. One, I'm a nurse educator and former manager and director at a hospital, so I understand that side of things and your challenge that you have to present the more expensive product to systems that are used to cutting every possible corner. The other side is I raise livestock and am a farmer. So my question, and perhaps this is the right group for it, is how could we take all of the data that's out there that shows that regenerative farming is beneficial and in the long run will save our communities money, and put a value on that so that we can present it to people in the C-suites of hospitals and say, this is why you need to do this. And I think UC Davis is in an excellent position as a research facility to possibly lead the charge on this. I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to bring it back to the farmers and put that value added on their products for doing the right thing, because they are saving the community in the long run through all the practices that we're implementing. So I'm asking you guys to consider it.
Yeah, you know, and that's a great point, and we have those conversations, and we've had it in various meetings that we've had with the campuses, and in fact we had a sustainability meeting at UC Santa Cruz that Tim put together, and we had all the dining directors and chefs and procurement people, and we talked about those factual things. But you're right, there should be a paper that shows the benefits and you know, what we're currently doing and what we could do with this, and the benefit for, you know, California, just not the campuses and the students and so forth. You're right, we should do that. We have that data, but it should be a paper because it's mixed in with a lot of other initiatives that we